Hello everybody and welcome to my entry into the Scratch Build Great Guitar Build-Off 2021. The design I have is what I'm calling the Conway, and I'll talk about the name a little later, but it's a sort of Japanese 60s inspired instrument. As you can see from the design here, got the control layout on the bass side, just weird asymmetric body. I nodded a lot to various models throughout the kind of 60s and 50s even of Japanese guitars. So the body is basically a Xenon ZS170 or ZES 170. The neck is or the headstock at least, is from a Guiatone LG60, slanted headstock design. The whole control layout and some of the neck design, the inlay design, was from the SD2L or the SS4L. They're quite similar models by Tyco. I just really like the wacky look of everything, and yeah, so there are some direct nods to models, but generally it's just sort of inspired by those guitars, as they've been what I work on, what got me into working on guitars. So I felt for this competition it would be good to do something that says more about myself, that isn't just your standard guitar, is something a little more unique that maybe not other people would think to do. I don't know, maybe everybody in the competition is building a Tyco style guitar. We'll see. So here I'm just cutting out the templates for the neck and the body. I drew out the full-sized drawing and then put that onto these plywood sheets. I'm just using my Pt.0 branded router. I've no idea how old it is, but it certainly feels old, so yeah. I came up with this technique to get the edges of the neck completely level. You can see those points of sawdust building up on either edge because there was a kind of bow in the side of it, in the side of the length of the neck. So this was just to get it flat, because obviously I want a straight neck. This caused a little problem, which was that the neck then became too thin, but when I use that as a template, I'm going to use a larger bearing on the flush trim bit router, and make it oversized, and then sneak up on that final dimension, probably with the same technique for the neck. I've gone with mahogany for the body and the neck. Not anything really to do with vintage Japan there. A lot of them have mahogany-esque woods. A lot of them also have plywood bodies, but I decided not to build a plywood guitar. Again, slanted headstock, and we're going to have a bound fingerboard and headstock. So quite Gibson-esque, I suppose, in a lot of ways. So I'm a guitar tech in the day. I do repairs, setups, guitar tech kind of things. But I've never built a guitar from scratch before. I've built them from kits, and I've had bodies, and I've worked on guitars, but never from scratch. Not from just a slab of wood into a guitar. So this is really something new for me, and here I'm writing out all the different jobs that I could think of doing, because it's quite overwhelming. When a guitar comes into the shop, it needs a nut replacing or something, so I can manage that in my head, whereas when you have all these different jobs, all these different parts, figure out how they're gonna coexist together, I felt writing it out might help. So yeah, and then here I'm just gluing the template onto this mahogany blank. It's a 3-piece blank, 1 3/4 inch thick, which is good because a lot blanks come as 2-inch, which would be too thick for this guitar, at least for me anyway. So not having to plane or route the body down to thickness is preferable. So that done, we're now going on to all the parts I bought. We've got some white primer, followed by some pearlescent car paint, I guess you could say using car paint is kind of traditional to guitar building. Fender always did it. And then here's the magic stuff, is the glitter. It should be quite a in-your-face finish, quite a sort of hot rod finish. Not necessarily vintage Japan, but I took some artistic license with that one. And then probably going to use a water-based clear coat on top. I got a dual action truss rod for this, which you'll just have to believe me is in that cobble box. And then fingerboard material, I went with ebony. Don't have ebony on any of my guitars actually. I think it's rosewood on all of them. So yeah, it's not a particularly plain piece of ebony, but it's you know, it fit within the budget. So yeah, it'll do for this. I was quite happy to be able to get mahogany neck and body and ebony, considering I was doing this on a pretty tight budget. 3-ply pickguard. Actually wanted 1-ply, but I must have just ordered the wrong one, so oops, but yeah, we'll see. And then I've got a sheet of steel here, and I'm going to be making quite a lot of various parts out of that. Neck plate, control plate, tailpiece, part of the bridge assembly as well. I want to scratch build quite a lot of this, not just the body and neck, but a lot of the hardware. And then a lot of binding, as I said. Neck and headstock and body is going to be bound. So, and then just a load of electronics and yeah, hardware that I'm not making because I don't want to make tuners. That doesn't sound fun. We just got alpha pots, full sized, for volume and tone. Electronics on this are. We've got the 2 P90 pickups. I am going to customise the covers on these to go for a kind of gold foil-esque look, but I haven't really got far with that design yet. But it's, yeah, there aren't just going to be stock Wilkinson pickups in this. I do want to make it look the part as well. But yeah, I'm going to go with on-off switches, the kind of Mustang style switches that you see on a lot of Tyscos, and then series and parallel, and then I may do some other fancy electronics, maybe even some onboard effect, but I'll see if I get time for that and see if I can afford that within the within the project. Yeah, these tuners are really cheap, but when you take the back covers off, they look just like any old Tysco or Matsumoto tuner, so work perfectly for this project. I tried getting the cover back on it, but it actually was a little a little sharp, as you'll see here, and I actually cut my finger. Sort of the kind of cut you get from when you're winding up strings and the high E or B goes straight through the tip of your finger. So yeah, I guess that's what you get with cheap tuners. But I guess you could say having cheap hardware and tuners is in the spirit of these Japanese guitars, but in truth it's just because I was on a budget. But there we go, they'll do the job for this. In terms of nut and saddle, and yes, saddle, I'm not going I've got a kind of acoustic saddle and I'm going to make my own bridge out of it, you know, Tysco-esque, the standard one you get with thumb screws, but I'm going to make my own, I think. We'll see how that goes. And then a Tusk XL nut. Just got some screws for neck plate, tailpiece, pretty standard stuff. So I wanted to practice the finishing on this guitar, also some of the routing. So I chopped off a couple of little triangles. I ended up using the larger two that I cut out here. To practice some finishing on. So I set up my router on the table so I can use it, you know, table mounted as well. And used the roundover bit I had, and then the flush bit with a smaller bearing than the cutting bit, so that it makes a little channel. It seems pretty easy to do. There's a lot of tools out there, but yeah, if you need to cut binding, just get a selection of you know, bushings, and then figure out how thick you need it. So I did that. It was actually a lot easier than I expected. It was one of those things with this project I was worrying about beforehand, like how do I cut a binding strip or a binding channel, but it wasn't too tricky, at least in this little tester. So I got some grain filler. I'm not sure if I'm going to grain fill the entire thing or just where the paint is going to be. I quite like the idea of having the open grain, but at the same time I do want to go for a high gloss, quite thick finish, so I guess those two don't really go together too well, but we'll see. I've got time to decide. So I'm going to be gluing the binding on with super glue, at least that's the plan. It was very easy here, but obviously I was just gluing on just a strip, not going around corners or anything, or on the fingerboard doing a little mitre on it. So yeah, maybe some false hope there in terms of it being really easy, but we'll see. The super glue held it really well, so I'm not too worried. Obviously a lot of people use acetone, but yeah, I'll probably be going with super glue. And I sprayed on the metallic finish. Here it is wet still. That's not dried, that's wet. And you can see my grain filling wasn't perfect, but I did this quite quick just as a kind of demo. I didn't film it either, but I scraped the binding off with a razor and also tried a sort of slanted leveling beam. Not sure how I'm going to do it on the final thing, but it worked out okay, at least for this little test demo. But again, it being on a straight edge made it a lot easier. And I didn't film any of this, but I put the glitter on top. There's no clear coat on this, by the way, which is why it looks very dull. But I think it looks really cool. It doesn't look too over the top, but yeah, looks just good enough. Anyway, that's all. Stay tuned for part 1. And let's see how it goes. Good luck to everybody else building in the competition. Happy building.